A special thank you to our May Platinum sponsor, Belfor, for taking the time to put together this relevant and timely content for our BOMA Hawaii members. Also, a special mahalo to you all, our BOMA Hawaii members and friends of BOMA Hawaii who have provided us feedback and resources during this stay at home and safer at home period. Our upcoming events will remain fluid as we adjust weekly and monthly to what information may be most valuable to our members and delivering it in a format that ensures the health and safety of our members. We will continue to communicate our upcoming events, resources, and educational opportunities. Without further ado, I am pleased to present Belfor's webinar entitled Going Viral with Cleanliness and introduce you to our speakers. Kirk Lively has been in property restoration since 1990 and is currently the Director of Technical Services for Belfor USA, a global property damage restoration company. He supports Belfor's local offices with his personnel and expertise to perform large projects or technically challenging projects. Tom Yacobelis is Director of National Operations for Belfor Mechanical and International HVAC Remediation, Restoration, and Diagnostic firm with 80 locations nationwide. He founded Dux International and has 38 years experience in the design, installation, and restoration of HVAC systems and 29 years specifically in HVAC remediation. Before we hear from Kirk and Tom, we will share with you Belfor's Town Hall video.
Hello and welcome to Belfor's COVID-19 Town Hall Question and Answer Forum. My name is Matt Horgan. I'm with Belfor Environmental, National Program Manager. Belfor Environmental works primarily with hazardous materials, including chemical and biological. And we're part of the Belfor family, and our role is to remove any kind of environmental hazards that are impeding the restoration process. Also with us is Kirk Lively, our Director of Technical Services. Technical Services Group provides different support functions, including evaluation of disinfectants, technology, tooling, and also solutions for our more technical customers. In addition to Kirk, we have Tom Yacobelis, who's with our Dux division. Tom's here to provide his industry knowledge and describe our capability for ducting and HVAC service that may be necessary. And finally, we also have David Watts, who is with CTEH, which is our important partner. David is a certified industrial hygienist and is here to provide expertise in epidemiology and infectious disease. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to the panel. Some questions have come in. I think the first few questions are probably best answered by you, David. David, someone sent in this question. What is the length of time the virus remains viable on surfaces?
Yes, thanks, Matt. Several studies have demonstrated the active virus could be found on surfaces anywhere from hours to days, and porous material such as cardboard and paper may have the virus for up to several days, while hard surfaces like glass and metal may only have the virus for several hours.
Okay, thank you. David, our next question seems to be best answered by you also. How can it be tested that we have cleaned appropriately?
Yeah, Matt, current test practices use a technique called polymerase chain reaction. It's PCR. This test will form and detect any of the virus based on a genome sequence and the presence of that genome. The RNA of the virus can be found with a swab sample. The virus could be found, but it may be viable or non-viable.
Okay, thank you. Kirk, looks like the next one may be for you. Will the disinfectant application cause any damage to electronics or other sensitive components?
Thanks, Matt. I've had this question posed several times. And, you know, the disinfectant needs to be applied lightly and uniformly in order to allow the surfaces to remain damp for the required dwell time. But if it's applied correctly, it won't cause any damage to the electronic components. And the entire piece of equipment should be completely dry within 30 minutes to an hour. And we need to remember that the real target of the application are the exterior surfaces that can be touched by a person. But, you know, we've had clients still worried about that. So if there's any doubt or concern over those sensitive components, instead of spraying them, we can just wipe them down and make sure that we don't have any excess moisture on them.
Very good. Thank you, Kirk. Another question looks like it may be for you, Kirk. How can we be assured that the cleaning has been effective and the facility is safe for personnel?
Sure. You know, one good thing is that the coronavirus is really relatively easy to kill. So that's usually that's not the problem. But Belfour only utilizes approved safe product from the EPA list in, and these products are applied, you know, as specified by the label directions and the manufacturer. And again, I mentioned the dwell time earlier. We want to make sure that we get it damp enough so that the item remains with moisture, with dampness, for the full dwell time required on that product, and it will achieve virus deactivation.
Yeah, very important. Thank you. And what are your treatment processes and why? Kirk, this probably couples with what you just said there. You could address that. What are your treatment processes and why?
Yeah, we're really just using two processes. We use a combination of wiping and spraying. So for surfaces that are dirty or touched frequently, they need to be cleaned first because there may be a buildup of soiling or oils on those items. So they may not be penetrated if you simply sprayed them. So it's not as easy as just walking in, spraying a disinfectant, and walking back out. So those surfaces that could have soiling on them really need to be wiped down, and they need to be wiped clean, but make sure that it maintains enough moisture to keep the dwell time as well.
Okay, thank you. This next question is a pretty popular question. I think it's becoming more and more valid as we get closer to reopening businesses, which is what we're all hoping for. But anyway, David, I think this may be best answered by you. If the building has been closed for a month, and is it still important to clean that building?
Yeah, Matt, you know, it's highly unlikely that any form of the active or viable form of the virus would still be present after several weeks or even a month or more, you know, without human occupancy. But however, there is a perception issue that employers must overcome with respect to how comfortable employees will feel returning to work, as well as even how patrons or customers coming in their establishment may feel. And these perceptions could in fact impact worker productivity as well as customer traffic.
Yes, thank you. The perceptions are definitely a valid consideration. Our next question, how soon after your cleaning can the building be reoccupied? I think I'll go ahead and take this one. Depending on the chemical or the disinfectant used, really it could be as soon as 20 minutes or so after we've completed our work. Typically, the dwell time is somewhere between 4 and 10 or 15 minutes, depending on the chemical that we're using. And once the dwell time is up, if the product doesn't require any further attention, it just simply evaporates. And as long as ventilation is adequate, we typically can turn spaces over pretty quickly. The next question has to do with HVAC and ducting systems. I think we will maybe include David and Tommy both on this. The question is, does the HVAC need to be cleaned because of COVID-19? I think, David, maybe you can give us your thoughts on HVAC treatment, and then Tommy, you can follow up.
Yeah, sure, Matt. You know, there actually may be certain contact points which warrant cleaning. such as thermostats or return grills or supply air diffusers. But however, complete cleaning of the HVAC may not be necessary. And given that many of these HVAC systems will have sat idle or offline or even not received routine maintenance or servicing for weeks or months, it's really important that building owners have these systems assessed for cleanliness. There's likely going to be accumulation of some mold or biological growth in these systems, such as evaporator coils and condensate pans and some of the mixing chambers.
Tommy, what do you think?
Although the air conditioning systems are unlikely to contain active virus, it's highly recommended that the key components of the HVAC system be visually assessed for the internal conditions and documented with the focus on the air handlers and the outlying VAV boxes. Systems that have been dormant for weeks could have other issues such as strong odors from mold, mildew, and bacteria. And those odors can also cause concern with employees inside the facility. These assessments are very low cost and establish a long-term and a short-term plan for the customer and the client to move the air conditioning system forward.
Thank you very much. I think that wraps us up for today. Please keep the questions coming, and we'll hold another town hall meeting to discuss the COVID-19 soon. Thank you all for joining us, and please send your questions.
Okay, so we're going to expand on what you just heard in the town hall meeting with Belfour. I've got a short section, and then Tom will follow on with some interesting discussion about the HVAC and the airflow issues involved with that. So let's start there and try and expand a little bit more on some of the key things that we're addressing as we start to reoccupy some of the buildings. So as you saw in the town hall meeting, there was David Watts with CTEH, and they're a world-renowned environmental consulting firm and they have specialties in epidemiology and infectious diseases. So Belfour, as a contractor, we understand the work plan and the processes needed to decontaminate facilities, to disinfect, but we really need the experts' guidance whenever it comes to COVID-19, something we haven't seen before. So we've partnered with CTEH and have come up with some protocols. They've developed some protocols for us, and then we establish those and put together our work plans. And then, of course, we'll address the HVAC after that. So one of the things, a little bit side topic, not just addressing the decontamination processes, but this is an example of an office protocol. And this is what Belfour has enacted in order to have us reoccupy our offices and have everyone feel safe and comfortable that they are in our office, they're safe, what measures we're taking. So these 5 bullet points here are the things that we're trying to do. Make sure that we provide some training to our employees when they're reoccupying the building so that they understand, a little bit more about the virus, maybe the routes of transmission, some of the key components about the COVID-19. And, if people don't like change and they don't like things that are unknown, so the more information that we can provide them, the more comfortable they're going to be coming back into that environment. So in addition to that awareness training, we have weekly professional office cleanings. And then we also, if you look at the last bullet point, we have the touch points, the high touch points, all of the countertops, desktops, door handles, all of those things that are the high touch points. We have those cleaned with sanitizer every day. And then we have signage posted at all the entrances so people know that we're taking this action, and it gives them a little bit of a sense of calm. And then we have a plan to be prepared in the event that someone tests positive. And in that case, we will isolate those areas. We will do some self-quarantine as needed. So we have a plan completely in place for that if that happens in our facility. So in addition to those procedures, we wanted to make sure that we're completely prepared with all of our supplies. So we want to have a 30-day supply of these items: the hand sanitizer, paper towels, tissues, commercial or personal masks, protective gloves, and then the appropriate disinfectants. So here's a few samples of disinfectants that are on the approved EPA list, on the EPA list in. So this is what we've undertaken in order to make everyone feel comfortable as they start to come back into our offices. And maybe it's something that you've done in your buildings, or it might be something for you to consider to do as you start to reoccupy your buildings if you haven't already done so. So we have locations here. We have signature lines here for general manager, regional manager, and our regional safety manager, so that it's clear that all the responsible parties have signed off on this procedure and that everyone is on board with it. So back to the treatment itself, we did answer a number of questions in the town hall meeting, but we have taken a little bit of a approach where if it's just somebody wanting to clean a facility, but there's no suspected or confirmed cases, then we have a canned protocol, one that's already prepared, and it's our proactive cleaning and disinfection protocol. And so that way we can provide that to our clients, show them all of the areas that we would address, how we would address it, exactly what we would do, what products would be used, and then that way they've got an understanding of what they can expect to happen in a proactive case. In cases where there are suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19, we do re-engage with CTEH and make sure that we have addressed any additional considerations that we may need to take because of that suspected or confirmed case in the building. So high touch points, I think you're probably familiar. We've talked about this a couple of times, but these are all the areas where are touched frequently. So the two methods of transmission, obviously, are person to person, which is the most problematic. But since we can't control the person to person transmission, what we really can control is the transmission by touching a contaminated surface and then getting that into your eyes or your nose or your mouth. So these are all the items that will be addressed, will be wiped down in a treatment process to make sure that if there's any contamination on them, that they get disinfected completely and are not a route of transmission. So the cleaning approach is a combination of wiping and spraying. I have seen some applications where people were just spraying and not wiping any surfaces, and we don't think that's appropriate. And CTEH basically advised us that the wiping is necessary for any surfaces that might have soiling or oils from your hands from frequent touching. So if you just spray those surfaces that are a little grimy or have hand oils on them, the disinfectant may not penetrate, and so it may not be 100% effective. So those are all the surfaces that we want to make sure that we wipe thoroughly, and then we follow that on once we've wiped all of those high touch point surfaces and soiled surfaces. We follow that on by a spraying application. David addressed the clearance criteria. Normally that's a critical piece for us whenever we're cleaning anything, is to have some measurable clearance criteria. But with with COVID-19, it's not really adequate to just sample the surfaces because there's so much surface area that could possibly be contaminated, and we can only surface sample a very small percentage of it. So it's not really going to give us an accurate indication of whether it's completely clean if we just sample the surfaces. So really what we've tried to do is establish a process that is extremely thorough, and then in critical cases for suspected or confirmed cases of COVID, we will often have a third party provide oversight to ensure that we're performing the protocol exactly as specified. So the chemicals that can be used, there's as I mentioned in the town hall meeting, coronavirus is relatively easy to kill. So what Belfour has done is we've chosen one of the products from the approved EPA list in, and we prefer a botanical solution. It's based on the thyme plant, THYME, and this is a very safe product. It's also a broad spectrum antimicrobial. It takes care of the COVID-19 as well as many other broad spectrum bacteria and fungi. So we like the BioS because it can be applied and allowed to dry even on food contact surfaces and doesn't require a post-rinse. But if we have clients that already have approved products that they want to use, then we will allow them to make their selection from the EPA list in. It may require some modifications of our procedures, but it's perfectly acceptable if they already have an approved product that they like to use. So here's some references for you, some links to the EPA disinfectants. The Center for Biocide Chemistry also has some reference materials where you can look up products and see their dwell time and all of the specifics about what they deal with. So at this point, I think we'll turn it over to Tom and talk about the HVAC and some interesting aspects about the airflow components.
Hello, everybody. My name's Tom Yacobelis. Kirk, you see my screen?
I do. Thank you.
Okay, super. Let me just get my, you know, it's funny, a few minutes ago, when I was watching the video of us, I'm wearing the same exact shirt that I was wearing. And so I started thinking that that was a picture of me, and I kept moving around wondering why I wasn't moving on the video. These Zoom meetings are really something, quite frankly. And I want to welcome you all, and I want to thank BOMA for inviting Kirk and I talk to you a little bit about the issues that we've already encountered and managed. My particular expertise is in mechanical air conditioning systems, but I have a more refined expertise in the psychological impact of those air conditioning systems on the staff that are returning to buildings. Kirk is quite modest, but he probably wouldn't have mentioned that very early on in March, we went over to Japan and we took care of a large cruise ship over there that had the COVID virus on it. We had to clean over 2,000 rooms in just about 16 days on the air conditioning system, a little bit longer, so that the ship could come off the port. And that was an active ship. A lot of what we're talking about today here is proactive. So when he's talking about CTEH and how instrumental they are in our guidance documents, this stuff has all been time proven out, tested out by both the Japanese Department of Health and Ministry and also the CDC with their finalized testing and the genetic testing. So just a little bit of background. Kirk heads all that up, and it's amazing some of the stuff that we do. I'm going to only talk to you about 3 things today. I'm going to talk to you about the HVAC supply vents that are in every building, and the airflow direction that comes out of those vents. I also want to talk to you a little bit about the outside air dampers that bring the air into the building, because dilution is one of the big things that we want to talk about. And I also want to talk about controlling just particles in general, the particle burden inside the space. The less free-floating particles, the less the virus has to attach to anything to actually be able to be inhaled. So those are the three areas we'll cover. We're not going to talk about dirty registers because we believe we're dealing with a group here that understands that there's a pretty profound psychological impact with dirty registers. Now, one of the things I just wanted to mention to you, though, of course, is of course your registers should all be clean. Something looking like this, I'm sure nobody's building looks like that, but in the event that you knew somebody that had a building that looked like that, you might want to tell them to clean these registers off, because psychological impact to the folks inside the building is very high. But one of the things I just wanted to mention before moving on is that when you have a register like this, believe it or not, that does not necessarily indicate that the system, the air conditioning system, is dirty. Frankly, quite honestly, it often doesn't indicate it. So I want to just dispel that rumor right now. There's something called the Coanda effect. You don't have to remember it. Just know that what it means is that the dirt in the room air, that basically what happens is the dirt in the room air accumulates right around the register. So quite often when you see a register like this, that's actually not coming out of the air conditioning system. It's the dirt in the room air. Is that me doing that? I think so, somehow. Okay, let me move on. So what we're concerned about today is the register types. These register types, they're linear registers. They blow air out like a fan. They blow it in a single direction. And the concern is, there's a pretty strong psychological concern of people, especially in areas where they're in a cubicle or in open space in an open environment. So cubicle type spaces, or where there's a group of people working together. And what happens is the air comes out of the registers. It may be blowing over somebody who could be a asymptomatic person, meaning they have no idea that they're sick whatsoever, and it blows over and then onto the second person. Now, the second person might be feeling really good about what they're doing, staying safe, 6 foot distance, and the first person may not have any idea whatsoever that they are asymptomatic, and that's where the problems arise. But more so than anything else, try to think in terms of the psychological impact. When someone's sitting in an office and they're thinking, no, I hope I'm safe here. They tell me I'm safe, and they're looking up and they see a register and they see it's blowing over 3 people and blowing towards them. That's just something you might want to be aware of as you start moving forward. So that being the case, we want to take a look at the type of registers. Now, not all registers are directional like the ones you see here. Some of them are different. So you might want to just take a look at the registers. Sorry, my mouse back.
You got one more X down by the guy's chin there.
Oh, I do.
Maybe that's preventing you from moving on.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe so. There I go. There. What am I doing here? Sorry, guys. That's what I get from playing fancy games here, right? Back to the mouse. There we go. Sorry, I just needed to click twice. So there's different types of registers that we have. These are all directional registers, and they can have the same effect on the inside of the system. Just something to pay attention to. There are other types of registers. They're diffused registers. So these registers, you'll see down in the bottom here, bottom left, that these registers are perforated, and they tend to actually mix the air a lot greater before they exit the register themselves. So that has a lower impact on actually putting airflow from one place to another. This is just something that we wanted to be aware of. Now, there's we are actually in buildings right now doing a procedure in a number of buildings, nursing homes, medical facilities, where if there are directional registers, and this is an activity that we do normally when we do our process of cleaning a mechanical system anyway, we'll go in and when we're cleaning a mechanical system, we'll cover over all the registers, the actual outlet of the registers with this blue filter media, usually MERV 6, MERV 7, or MERV 8. Not too high, because we're not trying to filter the air at this point. When we're doing mechanical system restoration, we are filtering the air when we do this. But we're covering over the registers, so the registers themselves then are diffusing the air better. It's something you may want to consider as you're reopening the building, mostly in the common areas of the building itself. Here is an example of a nursing home. This is the kitchen area of the nursing home. There were registers, linear diffused registers here, not slot diffusers. These are the linear diffusers that blow air straight out and over the dining room area. All of these areas were protected. This blue tape here is holding the filter media in place, and quite often the filter media can be held in place with painter's tape or duct tape or these clips. It's just a way of reducing the psychological pressure that people are thinking about. So I think these presentations will be available, but I've outlined here a little bit of how we put this on. If you do it, you want it to look good. You don't want it to be falling off. It really needs to look good. Otherwise, from a psychological standpoint, that creates an issue too. We've been doing this for almost 25 years, actually covering over registers, and it really has a fairly profound effect on people's psychology. They say, look, they're protecting us. The only thing that you want to do is you don't want people to be thinking that that filter media, with the COVID that is being put up to filter the air conditioning system. So as we cover over, I'll show you what I'm talking about. As we cover over the registers, you want to explain to them, you want to communicate to them clearly that the filter media is up there to diffuse the air coming into the building. So we get the maximum psychological effect, the maximum communication effect to everybody, and they understand that it's not because you think the air conditioning systems are dirty and you're trying to hold the dirt back. And once they get that in their mind, there's a real positive momentum that moves forward. Now, many of you probably have never seen this. These are computer models of how air flows in an environment. And they're very commonly done when they design hospitals. But just take a quick look at this. This just gives you an idea of just the craziness that goes on when air comes into a room. It really is a very difficult thing to predict. Nowadays, we have computational models that actually can predict, just moving a register from one place to another in a hospital room, exactly how the air is going to flow and how much of that particulate in the air is going to get picked up. In an existing building, you're not going to do any of these computational flows. You just need to be aware that these particles can go everywhere. So one of the things that we do to make sure that we are lowering the risk inside the building is we go outside and we go to the air conditioning units and we increase or open up to the maximum amount the amount of outside air coming into the building. This is called dilution. And they used to say dilution is the solution to pollution. It still carries some weight here because the more outside air you bring in, the more dilution is occurring, and it also will positively pressurize the building slightly. Now, for those of you who have very sophisticated automated controlled buildings, this was something that you'd have to get with your folks on. But many of you know who have worked on your mechanical systems that when often over the years, these outside dampers will get shut, or the mechanisms may not be functioning correctly anymore, or they're just not bringing in the outside air, or they were intentionally shut, which is, all of those things are understandable. But at this point right now, for the next few months, it's best to open these up and let in as much air as possible, as long as the pressurization of your building isn't going to be an issue. Yes, it's going to cost a little bit more money to run the systems, but it's lowering the risk and it's diluting the air. So that's the second thing that you could do. The registers is the first thing, and then the outside air is the second thing. The third thing that you can do is, and this is something that we can assist you with if you're thinking about it, is if you have open areas inside your environment. So, for example, this is an open cubicle area here. We have another open cubicle area here. Or you have a place where people are meeting regularly here. What you can do there is you can set up scrubbers, air scrubbers. This is something that we at Belfour have many of these air scrubbers. They're HEPA filtered air scrubbers, and they actually do a fairly profound job at capturing and lowering the particle load inside a building significantly. It can be measured. Within a matter of 45 minutes to an hour, you can watch the particle load in the building go from a lot to very little. That lowers the risk as well. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to apply to an area such as an office area where there's only one person inside, like these office spaces down here, because these office spaces are usually positively charged. And because of that, and there's no one else around, the risk is much lower automatically. Usually these offices will have a slight positive charge and the air will be coming out the door at that point. So we're talking about open and common areas for the most part. And we want to just keep an eye on that. Those are the three main things that you can look out for. So the CTEH protocol talks a little bit about the air conditioning units. Now, you're looking at a picture here, someone's looking at the coil, the evaporator coil in the air conditioning unit. And I'll tell you that the protocol that we have automatically says this coil should be cleaned and that the actual filtration should be replaced just as a precaution. When you have a large building such as this, you should be looking at the inside of the air handling and evaporator coils, the drain pan, all to be cleaned so that we can at least say, and we're not talking about automatically cleaning all the ductwork, but you should clean the units, make sure that, just accelerate your normal maintenance cycle, clean the units, clean the drain pans, replace the filters. The BioS product that Kirk is talking about is wonderful. That can be used as well inside, and then re-energize the system. Beyond that, if you have any other issues inside the air handlers, you'd have to actually do an assessment. We can help you with doing an assessment of the mechanical systems individually as well. That's what we're expert at. And then our protocol, which is available through our local office, it has the general designation of what to do with filter returns and supply grills. It's just basically a standardized cleaning. One of the reasons why is because your systems may have been off for quite some time. They may not be cycling in their normal cycle, and they may actually have started having biological growth. Nothing to do with even the COVID, but has to do with the biological growth. And that biological growth, if it has odors associated with it, let's just say mold, mildew, because it's been sitting for a while, that will trigger a psychological problem. That's one of the main reasons to go in and clean the mechanical systems is, again, it's psychological. We understand a lot of this is psychological, but we want our workers to feel comfortable coming back in. So all this information is available through Kaylin out of our Belfour office. And Kirk and I have been employing these techniques, and we're employing them in our own Belfour offices as well as our clients' offices. And we've been doing a lot of this combination contact wiping and mechanical system cleaning. So with that, I think we're ready to take some questions.
Thank you so much, Tom. This is Holly. So we have one question that was pre-submitted. The question is, I am the preservation librarian and book conservator. I would like to know how you treat and clean mold-infested books. And I think this one is for Kirk.
Yes, mold is interesting. I mean, let me first address something that you might have expected. You know, let's say a person that had COVID had a book, and they're returning it to the library. The CDC has come out with some guidance. I think we've mentioned it a little bit here, but after a certain number of days, that virus will no longer be viable. So a relatively conservative approach, and you can look this up on the CDC website, is they have provided guidance that if anything has been isolated and quarantined for 7 days, then they don't feel like there is any risk of having it still being exposed or having viable virus on that item. So our recommendation for books and paper contents that you think might be affected would be to isolate them and wait for 7 days before you do anything further with them. Now mold is a slightly different issue because that's persistent. It's going to grow whenever there's enough moisture, and it loves cellulose. So books have a long history of having mold growth problems, either on the outside covers or on the cellulose of the paper. Some of the glues are actually one of their favorite foods. They love the glues in the bindings and in the books. So mold, in our estimation, it's a physical removal process. I don't like using chemicals on paper or on books. So we would typically physically remove the mold and then try and make sure that it gets stored in a good environment, because as long as you maintain it in an environment that isn't going to promote mold growth, it will not grow further. So that's the general recommendation on how we would handle books and paper.
Thank you so much, Kirk. That's very helpful. I received 2 additional questions to the chat room. The next question, I believe, based on the timing of it, it will be for you, Kirk. And the question is, what does the signage need to say? And I think this is in relation to the office protocol recommendation to post signage at all entrances to inform employees and the public of proactive measures taken.
Right, and it's just a generic sign to indicate that COVID-19 procedures are in effect in the building, that so that people are aware that you have thought about it, you have addressed the things that need to be done. So, some of our signage, I showed that first slide with the bullet points of the things that we're doing. So we're making sure that we sanitize all the high touch point surfaces. We're doing a number of things to make sure that we keep everyone in the building safe. So we just list those bullet points there and allow them to know exactly what we're doing, so that people can, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety as people move back into these spaces. Some people may not be very concerned at all. Other people may have a high level of anxiety as they start to get around other people. So we just want to communicate as best we can so that we make sure and give them the answers that they're looking for and hopefully alleviate some of their concern.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kirk. Our next question, I believe, will be for Tom. Is there any COVID measures that we need to do with split AC type of systems?
Well, there's nothing on a split AC system, one which some of the components are outside, like the condenser unit, and some are on the inside. The primary focus would be on the inside unit. And yes, you just want to assure that the system is clean and operating in a clean mode. And so the filtration has the ability to pick up, to cleanse the air as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And the basic idea is, it's not likely that the COVID is going to be there, but the basic idea is that we don't want any dirty or moldy air conditioning coils plugging up or not being able to at least filter the air inside the building. So I would say just exactly what our protocol says: clean the evaporator coil, clean the drain pan, and make sure new filtration's in place.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. I believe the next question will be for Kirk. The question is, how often should high touch points be cleaned?
There's no set rule on that, but we've taken the approach that at least once a day we're trying to clean those in our offices. So I think that's appropriate. If you've got surfaces that are being touched by a lot of people throughout the course of a day, if you don't have any reason to believe that you have people with COVID-19 in your building, then it's just a proactive procedure. People like to see somebody cleaning, have the clean smells, things going on, and once a day is probably sufficient. If you have any problems, if you know of a person that's contracted it and they were in a certain part of the building, then we would tend to focus on that part of the building and clean those areas more thoroughly and more often for all of the high touch point surfaces.
Thank you so much, Kirk. The next question is for Tom. I believe in Hawaii, humidity is high year-round. Increasing the outside air could cause a mold bloom if the HVAC system is not able to treat all the fresh air.
Correct. Well, I live in Florida and we have the same exact issue here. That's why often the outside air dampers get shut, is because, first of all, it's difficult to control the humidity on the first pass, or the systems are using more electricity, or they have to run longer. It is something that has to be monitored. If opening up the outside damper is going to cause the relative humidity to rise, then you're just going to have to key back on the dampers to make sure you find some sort of in-between balance that makes sense. But I fully understand it. Not all the systems can handle the amount of outside moisture that's coming in. Often, for example, in Florida, sometimes we have to install secondary systems just to bring that fresh air in. And frankly, it's done quite often nowadays to have secondary systems. I'm not suggesting that, but it is something that will have to be monitored.
Thank you so much, Tom. I had one more question come through. In practice, does everyone in Kirk's office, I guess in reference to Belfour's office, wear masks at all times while in the office?
We don't require that everyone wear masks, but we certainly make them available for anyone that wants to wear them. And we've established our work areas so that people can be physically distanced apart appropriately when they're doing their work. If we were to get in a situation where we needed to be in much closer quarters, then we would recommend using masks for those situations. So we have a number of people that just feel more comfortable wearing masks, so we make them available and they do that. And like I say, for a conference meeting or something where we're going to be a little more in closer quarters, we will ask that everyone wear masks, but on a general day-to-day basis, we leave that up to the people in the office.
Thank you so much, Kirk. That's very helpful. At this time, we do not have any additional chat room questions. Kirk, oh, we do have one more. One more just came in. The question is, do you recommend on the plumbing system of buildings that have been shut down for a while?
Probably, what do you recommend?
Yeah, what do you recommend for plumbing systems, Tom?
Thank you.
Well, that's a good question. The plumbing systems have been associated with the spread of COVID. There was a case in China of an apartment building that was, in fact, it was discovered that it was the plumbing. But these are leaky plumbing systems. And it's actually, it's pretty gross, but it's carried in a fecal matter. COVID virus is carried in the fecal matter coming out. So I don't know that I have any specific recommendation other than making sure that the plumbing system is working well. And most importantly, if the building has not been occupied for a while, that all the water traps, the traps for the mechanical units, the traps in the floors in the bathrooms are all filled with water, so you don't have a reversal of sewer gases coming back into the building, because many of them will have dried out.
So I think I would add on to that exactly is that you'd want to flush your plumbing, you know, so if you haven't been, if it hasn't been in use, as Tom said, turn on all the faucets for, you know, 15 seconds or 30 seconds, monitor it. That'll fill up all of your P-traps. Make sure that, that it's functional, it's not leaking. And of course, your drain system is equally as important as your supply side and the plumbing. So not a whole lot that you would need to do for a well-functioning plumbing system, but definitely I would run all of your supply plumbing, and then make sure that everything is functional.
I want to nominate that question for the best question of the day.
Awesome. Thank you both for your feedback. I have one more chat room question. For those dealing with supply shortages, does Belfour sell cleaning solutions without service? So I guess like products only?
We don't. We purchase all of our products from a variety of suppliers. So if you're having trouble getting something, we could potentially link you up with some of the suppliers that we use. But we don't sell products. We only use them as part of our service.
Okay. I believe that will be the last question. I don't see any new questions coming through. Kirk and Tom, do you have any closing comments or words of advice for us?
I would just say that, you know, the COVID-19 has been such an eye-opening event that we've all been trying to come up with the right types of procedures, the right response to it. We don't want to over-respond. We don't want to do overkill of what's necessary and what's needed. But on the other hand, the consequences of this virus have been so amazingly bad that we all want to take the right precautions, both in terms of personal protection and in terms of cleaning the touch points, the high touch points. But as I mentioned before, the one thing that we're not able to control is the transmission from person to person. So once a building has been cleaned, as soon as people come back in, they could potentially be infecting other people and contaminating building surfaces. So it's really a challenging process to make sure that we're doing all the right things. So I think that with our different partners that we have with CTEH and some of the expert professionals that we've hired and are working with as our partners, we've come up with the best solutions that we have. But I know there's still a lot of things that are just being discovered about COVID-19, its routes of transmission, all of the different aspects of it. So we're all learning as we go, and we want to continue learning and doing a better job as more information becomes available.
I don't have anything else to add to that. That was fantastic, other than just make sure you keep all your communications as open as possible and to everybody that's working in the building or facility, so that you have a clear line of communication, well documented.
Thank you both, Kirk and Tom, for your expertise and for your guidance. The last question is, will the webinar and this information, your slides, be made available? And yes, we are recording this session. And if you would like a copy, you can email bae@bomahawaii.com. For questions specifically for Belfour, you could also reach out to Kaylin Yoshida. She's our local Belfour and BOMA Hawaii representative. This concludes today's Going Viral with Cleanliness webinar, brought to you by Belfour. I would like to thank Belfour, Kirk, and Tom for taking the time to share best practices related to COVID-19. Also, a special mahalo to Kaylin Yoshida of Belfour here in Hawaii, who made this presentation possible. Last but not least, thank you to everyone who attended today's webinar. We look forward to seeing everyone in person. Thank you and have a wonderful day.